Hey everyone, it's Aaron. Welcome to Inhabiting Stories. In today's video, we are going to do the July wrap-up and the August TBR. I love listening to other booktubers make these videos. I love making, well, this is only my second wrap-up and TBR video, but it's just fun. It's cool looking back at what I've read the past month and see what hit and what missed, and did my tastes evolve or change a little bit. Every book we read is a journey we're going on, and I like to see, did I discover any treasures along the way in these different journeys? And yeah, so let's just get into the wrap up. I had a few audiobooks I've read. I didn't even count the number. I think maybe 2 or 3 audiobooks, one on my Kindle, and a few other ones. So let's just get into the July wrap up. All right, first up, I finished the Odyssey in July. And yes, just like everyone else who was reading it so they could watch the movie, yes, I did that. I never read the Iliad or the Odyssey, so this was great. I think it was a great reason to read those texts. I did enjoy this more than the Iliad. This felt much more like a narrative structure than the Iliad did. The Iliad was a bunch of war, which is great. That's what it was supposed to be. This was much more of a narrative structure, and I just enjoyed that a lot. There was awesome monsters. There was the Cyclops. There were giants. There was the Scylla, the sea monster. There were the sirens, all that cool stuff. So I just really enjoyed finally delving into this. It's something I'll definitely reread in the future. And I actually wanted to read this little passage in chapter 5 or book 5 of the Odyssey really quick. And I just love this verbiage. It's really strong. So it says this, and this is Odysseus speaking. He says, "Nevertheless, I long, I pine all my days to travel home and see the dawn of my return. And if a god will wreck me yet again on the wine-dark sea, I can bear that too, with a spirit tempered to endure. Much I have suffered, labored long and hard by now in the waves and wars, and this to the total, bring the trial on." I just love that. That was epic. Odysseus endures, and I love stories about characters enduring trials and suffering through it and seeing how they turn out on the other side. So this was great. This was my first book I finished in July. All right, next up for July, I read Two Like the Lightning by Ada Palmer. Now, I went over this, I think, in my previous video of my favorite books I've read so far in 2026. So I'm not going to go into exact detail about this, but it's Earth set in the 25th century. Government system is set up totally different, very unique. Ada Palmer is an excellent storyteller. She's very smart. What I loved most about this was the very unique storytelling. The character voice was really well fleshed out. Each character, they're all so unique and so different and so just strange, but she did an excellent job just going through the characters and introducing you to them and how they interact with one another. It was really, really well executed. As much as I was confused, even beyond the halfway point, I just couldn't stop thinking about it in my free time. So this was a really great read, and I just really enjoyed this book. So I'll definitely continue in the series in the future. Next up was War Master's Gate by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This is book 9 in the Shadows of the Apt series. If you like sieges and battles and political stuff, and if you like bugs, you'll not like this series. It is way more fantasy leaning than sci-fi for Tchaikovsky. I've overall enjoyed my experience. There is one more book left in the series, and I did end up reading it this month. So I will talk about that later in the video. But so far, this was an enjoyable read. This was book 9 out of 10, so I'll let you guys know how book 10 went in a minute or two. All right, the next book I read was via audio, and it was called The Star's My Destination by Alfred Bester. And it was about this man who is stranded in space, and he basically tries to pursue the people that left him there to die. And I'll just say this was maybe my least favorite read of the month. It's just not my thing, and I don't know if this is a classic sci-fi novel and it just went over my head and I didn't understand it, but it just, I didn't like almost anything about it. The dialogue was strange. Yeah, I don't need to go into detail about why I didn't like a book. It just wasn't my thing, but if you like sci-fi, you should look into it. All right, and then I finished Skysworn, book 4 in the Cradle series by Will White, and this is probably my favorite so far. Again, I don't like training montages. I said this in my other video about this series. There's a lot of training montages because it's progression fantasy. And, you just go from powerful to more powerful to more powerful to most powerful. And I guess that's the end. I don't know how it's going to end up. So I've actually heard more negative things about the ending than positive, but I don't really care. We'll see how it lands for me. But this is probably my favorite regardless. there is a new antagonist that was introduced that really upped the stakes. These books are not very reflective for me. The prose isn't like anything exquisite, but they're just very fun. It's just fun action. It reminds me of Dragon Ball Z, and I've heard other people say the same. And I watched that growing up with my dad and stuff. So if anything, it's just nostalgic and it's enjoyable. And it's just a fun way to put in the space of my thick, very thought-provoking reads to have something like this to just reset my brain. So yeah, it was great. All right, next I finished The Tyrant's Law by Daniel Abraham. And this was book 3 in the Dagger and the Coin series. Abraham is becoming he is one of my favorite authors at this point, top 3 or 4 at least. His writing is just completely inviting. The second I pick up his novels again, I just remember exactly how it feels, how his writing just sits well with me. I love his evocative nature imagery he puts in his books. So book 3 did not suffer from middle book syndrome, where it's just like the setup for the last book. There's 5 books in this series. This did not suffer from that, where you're just kind of like plodding along, waiting to get to the ultimate climax in the last book of the series. You're just following your main characters, and they're navigating through a new political and religious order. And I don't have very many complaints at all with this book. It has one of my favorite female MCs in fantasy. Maybe my I'd say top 3 favorite female main characters in fantasy. There we go. She's so well written that and in this book she has a POV, and it's just great. I had to cut myself off from gushing about the character too much. But anyways, another one of my favorite things about Abraham's writing is his ability to write dialogue. It's just believable. It's easy. You can just picture them in your minds having these conversations, and I just love that. So there are 2 books left in this series, and I can't wait to round out the series. I really want to get to Long Price Quartet, because I've also heard really good things about that. So yeah, but anyways, book 3, Tyrant's Law by Daniel Abraham, and it was just a really great read. All right, next up I did the audio version of The Golem and the Jinni by Helene Wecker. This is my first Wecker novel, and I'll just say it was exactly what I thought and hoped it would be. It was about a story of a golem and a genie set in New York in 1899. And it's a story of them crossing paths. They both ended up in New York somehow. And they are just navigating the world, being in a human world and being these supernatural beings. And the narrator did an excellent job. To see them experiencing the world was just really intriguing. It was very slow paced. You didn't even really see what the full plot was going to be until I think over halfway. But it was just enjoyable regardless. I didn't really need it to speed up or to get to some action. There was not a lot of action in this book. So if you're expecting some golem genie fighting, it doesn't really happen that much. But it was really well plotted, really well paced. I'll definitely continue in the series. I think I'm going to keep doing audio because I really liked it. And then if I like the audio that much, I am going to purchase them physically. That's just what I like to do. All right, so I don't really rate books in these videos just because I want to tell you how I felt about it and kind of give you a little synopsis. But this next book that I read, it was definitely a 5-star. I had 2 5 stars in July, and this was one of them. And it was The Poet Empress by Shen. And it was everything that people have been saying. I don't even think I need to say much about it. I'll just say what I loved. I loved the exploration of sacrifice, of what it means to love, of acceptance despite flaws and weaknesses. There's definitely an exploration of family trauma. There are some extremely moving family-themed moments, and this book evoked emotion in me, maybe unlike any other. AMC was written superbly. I absolutely loved the magic system. That was probably one of my favorite parts. But yes, The Poet Empress, I read it on my Kindle, and now I'm going to buy a physical copy because I loved everything about it. Okay, next up I listened to The Buffalo Hunter Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones. This was very unexpected. I've heard a little bit about, kind of the setup of it. I didn't look into it too deeply, and I just had it on audio, so I listened to it, and it was kind of shocking. The narrator did really well, kind of doing the different voices. There are actually 3 different narrators, I guess, in the version I listened to, but they did a really excellent job. There were some horror aspects to it, and I'm not a horror reader, but it wasn't enough where it, I wasn't uncomfortable or anything. It was really well executed. I would read more from the author. It was still a really great read, so I'm glad I read it. All right, and now for my second 5-star read of July, it was The War Host of Vastmark by Jinni. And what can I say? There's nothing, she can do no wrong at this point. And it's only 3 books out of 11, so she could do a lot of wrong, I suppose. But just from what I've heard and what I've experienced so far, I don't know. I said this about the last 2 books I've read by her. In every book, there is at least one scene that sends me over the edge, in the sense of it is so beautiful and evocative and ethereal, and it feels like a liminal moment, and I'm just sensing something divine there. And it happened in this, maybe the scene in this book surpassed the other 2. I don't know. It's so good, and it's such a terrible way to say how much I enjoyed this. But again, you're just delving deeper into the story of Erathon and Lysair and their war against one another. It was somewhat of the same setup, in the sense of there was this conflict, there was this smaller conflict within the big conflict of, the Curse of the Mistwraith, and then the conflict is kind of resolved. So you're kind of like, oh, it's the same, kind of plot setup, but doesn't really matter, because she's just an excellent storyteller. And these books work best if you take your time. If you're just patient with yourself, if you want to just fly through it because you need to get done, or because you're trying to fit all the other reads in, I don't know if you'll have a great experience. I guess that goes with any book, but this especially, because the prose is so lyrical and it's so specific, and you can actually miss things if you don't slow down and read the prose the way it deserves to be read. So anyways, between this and Poet Empress, I'm not even going to pick a favorite of the month. It was between these 2, and they're both so good. All right, and last book I read for July was The Seal of the Worm by Adrian Tchaikovsky, and this is book 10, the final book in the Shadows of the Apt series. I don't want to be a super downer, but I'll just say I wasn't satisfied. And obviously I'm not going to go into reasons why. I just think that the main thing was the characters that you're introduced to at the beginning. Obviously they're going to be different by the time you get to the end. And I wasn't completely satisfied with where they ended up. So that was it. I'm not going to hate on it. I still think it's worth reading the series. But there was probably 2 books in the middle of the series that were my favorites. And the way it ended up just wasn't what I was expecting. And it was fine. I don't want to go too long on why I didn't like it. So, yeah. Anyways, so that was my July wrap-up. Now we'll get into the August TBR. So I have about 13-ish books. I want to see if I can get through. A few of them are audiobooks. So we'll start with the audiobooks. The first one I want to go for is Bearhead in the Dogs of War series by Adrian Tchaikovsky. The first book was called Dogs of War, and I've talked about it, I think, in every video. So it's excellent. Bioengineered animals. They're made to be soldiers, and things happen, and they're not just soldiers anymore. So I want to go for that. Second, I want to listen to The Hidden Place by Helene Wecker, which is the sequel to the Golem and the Jinni by Helene Wecker, which I just talked about. And we'll see how that goes. I'm really intrigued by the story, to see what happens with those 2 as they navigate this world that they're living in with a bunch of humans. And the third audiobook I'm going to be listening to is actually a reread, and it is Lord Fowl's Bane by Stephen Donaldson. I'm not interested in talking about the scene at the beginning. I'm sure everyone's heard about it. Just go look up your trigger warnings before you read this. But I'll just say my experience with this book overall, I read it last year. It was absolutely amazing. I am totally intrigued by the character of Thomas Covenant. So I want to listen to it, read it in a different medium just to experience that. So yeah, this will be my third audiobook I'll read in August. Okay, next are 2 books I'm just going to be continuing from July, and one is just this book of poems by Christina Rossetti. Beautiful writing, especially if you enjoy like nature-themed poetry. She's been excellent. I've loved a lot of stuff in here. And my other continuation is Wilderness Essays by John Muir. So I'm not too far into this yet, but I was not expecting the depth of lyrical and beautiful writing that he has when it comes to nature. And it's just awesome. I'm reading this because I'm going on vacation actually in a few days. So I wanted to take this. I'm going up in the mountains, and I wanted to take this with me just to, enhance my experience of nature, I suppose. But yeah, I'll just continue with this in August as well. All right, next up for August is another reread. My personal philosophy on keeping books, which who cares? It's just how I do it. Unless I would consider rereading it, I don't want to keep the book. I want to keep books that I love. I have so many books already, and you don't want to hoard tons of books that are just meh. At least I don't want to. So unless I would reread a book or absolutely love it, I consider if I want to keep it in my library. So this one that I'm going to read, I'm rereading it, so I love it. It's Thrice by Andrew Meredith. It's a father-son journey, Slavic-inspired fairy tale-ish. You should definitely go for it if you've never heard of it. Okay, and then I'm going to do The Ill Earth War. This is book 2 in the Chronicles of Thomas Covenant. I haven't even read the back. I don't even know what it's about. I just know that I enjoyed my experience with the first book so much that there's just no way I'm going to dislike this. At least I hope not. We'll see. Okay, and then probably the first book I'm going to start in August is going to be Lost Stars by Claudia Gray. I've never read any Star Wars novels, and I've actually never been a big Star Wars guy. My dad was really into it, and of course I watched the movies with him. That was always fun memories. But I just was never, I guess I like more fantasy, so I didn't get really involved in the movies. But I've heard really good things about the books, and seems like a really easy read and a really good introduction to Star Wars. And I already bought other books. Actually, you can see them right there somewhere. There's some more books, Star Wars books right there. One of those things where I bought a bunch of books before I read any of them, or like read the first one of anything. So hopefully it was smart. I don't really do that anymore. But yeah, I'll be going for this. It just seems fun, and hopefully it works out for me. Okay, next up will be The Widow's House by Daniel Abraham, which is book 4 in the Dagger and the Coin series. So again, I didn't read the back, don't know what it's about. I'm continuing in the series in August, and then in September I will finish off the series. I'm extremely excited about this book, and I can't wait to finish off the series. Okay, next up is going to be Ghostwater by Will White, which is book 5 in the Cradle series. And like I said before, Skysworn, the previous book, was my favorite so far in the series. And we'll see what Ghostwater has in store. The cover looks super cool, so yeah, we'll see how that goes. All right, and the last book I'm for sure going to get to in August is going to be Seven Surrenders by Ada Palmer, book 2 in the Terra Ignota series. I feel like I have to keep the momentum with this series because the first book was so insane. If I leave too much space in between, I'm just going to forget everything. I'm going to have to watch so many reviews just to remember, and I don't want to do all that. So if all goes well, I'll continue in the 3rd and 4th books, but I love this cover too. So, all right. And the last 2, these are just what ifs. If I get to it, if I squeeze them in. So here's the first one. I've had this for such a long time. Gyrael of Jory by C.L. Moore. Yeah, I love the cover. It's very short. It's like 200 pages. And it's just been sitting there, and I'm like, man, I could just literally read this maybe in an evening, or not, maybe two sittings. And yeah, it just looks cool, and maybe I won't like it, and I can just unhaul it, but it looks nice, and I want to go for it. Okay, and then last I want to go for in this month, if it works out, is book 3 in the Elric saga by Malcolm Moorcock. I absolutely love Elric. He's one of my favorite fantasy MCs at this point. I don't know terribly much about him because I've only read 2 books, but from what I do know, I think he's great. I love his moodiness. He's like an emo albino character with a sword, and I just love the kind of philosophical take that Moorcock, uses with Elric. And yeah, book 2, I didn't like as much as book 1, but I'm either on book 3 or book 4. It doesn't say it on the front which one. I think I'm on the Sailor and the Sea of... The Sailor on the Seas of Fate. The Sailor on the Seas of Fate. That's where I'm at. So I'm going to be going for that one if I have time. Again, these are short. This isn't like an omnibus. And there's like 4 books in this. I have the other versions too. And I just love that cover. Like, who wouldn't like that? But so yeah, that's my July wrap up and my August TBR. Let me know if anything sounds good. If you've read any of these books before, if you're planning on reading any of these books in August. If you want to connect further with me, I have my socials linked below in the section down there. And thanks for watching this video, and I will see you later on. Bye.